Supernatural Season 9, Episode 12, titled Sharp Teeth. Now, this episode kind of takes place, if you notice, a few weeks after, last week's episode. One of the things that randomly caught my eye for some reason is that in this episode, Dean has like a ton of facial hair compared to how much he normally has. And, like, in the episode when or in the scene when he's like on the computer, you really see how close up, in the close up, he has a ton of facial hair. So it really made me realize it's been a couple of weeks, technically since, last week's episode. So some time has passed, and, Sam and Dean have been apart for, quite some time now after they split up, after, Sam figured everything out. And they find out in this episode, the reason Garth has been missing for all this time is because he ended up becoming a werewolf, and he joined the pack, and he was scared. He knew the deal of being a hunter. He even mentioned how he was going to kill himself. And the woman who actually ended up becoming his wife, she saved his life at pretty much the last second. And as he put it, the rest is history. And I thought this was a really good episode because, for one, we got to see Garth. I mean, for me personally, Garth wasn't really that big of a deal to me. I barely ever even thought about him. I never even really considered the fact that he was missing. He's either in the episode or he's not. It's kind of is or isn't for me, and he never really mattered that much to me. He was obviously, for a small time, he was sort of, a replacement character for, Bobby. But that was kind of just, he'd come in a little bit and he kind of took Bobby's place, and then he kind of, he disappeared. So in this episode, we figure out, why he disappeared, and, there's a cool mission behind it, and, the big thing about the episode that they drop in, until the very end, which I really enjoy, is the fact that, Sam and Dean, they're brothers, and Dean kind of left because he felt, all this guilt because of, Kevin's death. And something they did, with Garth, where he felt guilty because he left, and, he constantly, I think he said it, two or three times. He kind of said the same thing in different ways, where it was basically, I left and I never should have done that because, Kevin was my friend, and, friends don't leave other friends behind and things like that. And so it was a really good parallel to, you know, with Sam and Dean finally back together. It was a good parallel for Dean to realize, like, man, maybe I shouldn't have left and freaked out because, I felt guilty for not just, letting Kevin die, but I let my brother be taken over, which, kind of led to Kevin dying. So it was a cool little parallel for, how Garth felt and, how Dean felt too. And, it kind of led up to the end of the episode where, you know, Sam basically says he can't trust Dean anymore, at least not the way he should be able to, because, they're brothers. And he talks about, Dean talking him down from, closing the gates of hell, and just how every problem they have, whether, it's one of them dying or one of them dying after the first one dies to bring the first one back, which, that's just what they do. It's because they're family. And so, Sam kind of gives him his terms. He says, we can work together because, of course, Sam and Dean, they make a good team. But as far as them being brothers, it's kind of off the table. They kind of have to just be, two hunters. And, of course, I don't see that happening. But, I think we'll get to see a cool, dynamic for the show that we never really got to see, which will be, Dean's going to be trying to, really be like the family one, and Sam's going to be fairly distant, and not just because something's wrong with him, but because he doesn't want to have that attachment because he knows it just screws them up, and it's not like, it's some greater purpose. It's just, every time you talk me down from something, or I talk you down from doing something, or I die or you die, it's because we're family, and we end up doing that to sacrifice ourselves or to save the other one, even though we should kind of be saving the entire world, and we end up just saving each other, and that's it. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But in this episode, they were pretty much split up the whole episode for the most part. And I thought that was actually interesting because, they were technically working together, but, they weren't really together except for a couple of scenes when if you go back and watch the episode, they weren't together for too many scenes. They were mostly talking over the phone. But I thought it was a really good episode. Loved the, Um, the Ragnarok thing I thought was fairly interesting, even though it kind of, they obviously killed off all the bad werewolves in the clan. But it would be interesting to see that come back and have, you know, more of more werewolf packs, and something they kind of did when the evil woman at the end, when she mentioned her dad and she said daddy, it made me think of like, the alpha stuff, the alpha werewolf and things like that. But, it had nothing to do with them, unfortunately. But I thought that would be really cool if it did. But sadly, it didn't, and, they're all dead, so it doesn't really matter. But I'd like to see Garth come in and, him and his wife and, his father in law, them being like good werewolves and, you know, being maybe being like werewolf hunters in a future episode. I think that would be really cool to see, and they have actual control over it, and maybe they don't really interact with other hunters because obviously hunters are gonna attack werewolves. But if they're working with Sam and Dean, and maybe if Cass is in it too, that would be really cool to see. Garth come back as a werewolf character, and it would make him a lot cooler to me because he'd be able to actually fight and do a lot more than scrawny Garth can. But ultimately, loved this episode. It was a nice sort of one-off episode. We got to see a character we haven't seen in forever, and also it gave us, like I said, the parallel between Garth, how Garth felt when he learned Kevin died, and how Dean felt ever since Kevin died. So it was cool to have that lead up to the ending where Sam and Dean are back together, but they aren't the Winchester brothers back together. They're Sam and Dean. They're separate. They're in the same car, but two separate people just doing what they do. So excited for the episodes coming up. I'm definitely curious to see just how their dynamic goes from now on. Even with Cass in the middle, kind of being the mediator, they're still gonna have their problems. So excited to see that. Love this episode. Werewolves always cool. Not that they changed or anything, but you know, still interesting to see. But comment below, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Favorite parts, least favorite parts, and with Sam and Dean now back together with sort of weird makeshift, partnership. How do you guys think that's really gonna play out, for the rest of this season? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.